Morning, everybody, and welcome to the 12th in our series of commentaries on the crisis, in which we're intending to bring insight into the way businesses are changing, the stages of that change, and how we can recognize these changes and how best as HR, finance professionals, we should react to those changes. So what signs we should be looking for and how we should be reacting. And then really also talking to people from various industries so that we can share experiences and understand better what's happening across different sectors so we can learn from those as well. We'll be focusing today really on the replanning, relaunch and the new reality section. In previous webinars, we talked a lot about the early stages of the crisis, etc. But you know, things are moving on with great speed, as we all know. The shops are open, etc. So we're kind of at an exciting but febrile point in the crisis. So I'm delighted today that we're going to be joined by Jonathan Kohler, who is head of change, control and governance at MS Amlin, the insurance company. Now, I don't know much about MS Amlin and the insurance work and how it was impacted. So I'm going to ask Jonathan to comment on that in a second. So morning, Jonathan. Thanks for joining us.
Morning, Tom. Thanks for having me.
I think that, so Jonathan, could you talk to us a little bit about the business, MS Amlin, what you do, and how you were impacted at the early stage? So I know quite a lot about the business. Insurance is clearly one of our key areas, but I'd really like to understand more about how you fit into that market, etc., and what happened during that early stage.
Sure. So MS Amlin are part of the MS and AD group of companies who are headquartered in Tokyo, Japan. MS Amlin, we're kind of four different groups, smaller companies. So there's an MS Amlin Underwriting Limited, who are a Lloyd's of London-based insurer. So we are Syndicate 2001. We write specialist insurance in the Lloyd's market. So things like marine insurance, so ships, boats, hulls, cargo, oil rigs, energy. So some really interesting stuff all around the world. We have MS Amlin Insurance SE, which is our Belgian-based European insurer. And they do more B2B insurance, again, similar property and marine insurance, but across the European market. And then we have a third company, which is MS Amlin AG, based in Switzerland. They are a specialist reinsurance company. So they have offices in Switzerland, and we also have an office in Bermuda. And they work quite closely with some of our London Lloyd's reinsurance organization as well. But they primarily just do reinsurance, which is natural catastrophes, earthquakes, hurricanes, windstorms, hailstorms in Europe, for example. And then we have our business services organization, which is kind of centered in London, but supports all three of our insurance writing platforms as well. So that's who MS Amlin are in a nutshell. Some of the stuff we do is really interesting. Some of it's slightly probably a bit more boring, but ultimately our job is, as an insurance company, is to be there when things go wrong. So when there are natural disasters, when there is a big fire, when there are hurricanes and earthquakes, our job is to pick up the pieces and to pay our clients as quickly as we can. I mean, we during the New Zealand earthquakes, which was a few years ago now, Christchurch was decimated, and it wasn't that long ago that it was Jacinda Ardern came over to Lloyd's, and they stood with some of our reinsurance underwriters and some of our claims team, and literally was thanking them for the speed with which we helped support and rebuild New Zealand during that time. But that's kind of what we're there for, right? We're there when things go wrong to pay out, which is why this current situation is kind of quite scary, but it's kind of why we're here as well.
So I'm kind of guessing that, you know, whichever way you look at our current situation, it is a massive business crisis as well as a personal crisis on many, on so many levels, and also global. So I'm kind of imagining you guys were in the eye of the storm in terms of many customers actually wanting to make very significant claims. And then I'm assuming also on the other side of it being almost impossible to assess risk and insure things. So what actually happened to the business? Did you end up with no business, furloughing people? Did you end up, I mean, what did you have to do to keep going as a business during that early point?
Well, we're quite lucky, really, insofar as our insurance organisations sit on huge piles of capital, and we store it away for these rainy days. So, and also because we have such a strong parent in the MS and AD group and MSI Japan, we haven't had to furlough anybody. We also, I suppose, fortuitously embarked on a large culture change program last year, which which some of your team know about, where we spent a lot of time talking about how we can create a better work-life balance. We call it work-life better. So we were kind of in a good place when it came to not having to furlough all of our staff, being able to have our teams work remotely and be kind of successful at working remotely and having experience of it. But I suppose in those first few weeks, there was, we were being asked to close our offices because people were having to work from home. So how we were going to do that, what processes, what parts of our organization couldn't be done from home, if any. We therefore had to identify all of our key workers and get key worker letters sent out to people. The regulator was on top of us, asking us who our key workers were, what was our risk exposure, and so actually how many claims were we likely to pay out. So all of this stuff was happening very, very quickly in the first few weeks. And I suppose what was really lucky on our part is that we were quite prepared for this type of working from home, being successful working in teams remotely. We had kind of started on that journey, and what was quite nice is that some of those naysayers who were forced into doing this have become real advocates for it as well.
That is very interesting, and I'll come back to that. What the change in the way people are thinking about work, but so from a practical point of view, you were closing down all your offices, moving everybody out to the and what sort of challenges were there? Was everyone able to work from home? Was this part of your previous disaster plans, which you just pressed a button and said, right, it's disaster plan B, let's do it, or was it more complicated than that?
So to be fair, we laugh and joke about our business continuity planning teams, and they are doom mongers. They're always quite pessimistic. They're always thinking the worst could happen. But hats off to them. The preparations we did, the working from home tests that we did, it all kind of paid off actually. So although it was tough at first, getting everybody to kind of getting used to the new ways of working, and there were a few processes that we had which we hadn't managed to get ourselves into a good place for electronically. We did have to identify some key workers that could support claims processing, where some of our systems wouldn't allow things to be printed off from home. So from an information security point of view, we don't allow people to print things to personal printing devices. We need to keep everything within our network. So we did have to quickly work with the regulators, with advisors, with our COOs to identify who those key workers were, and understand what the processes that they needed to be able to. Printing was a really big one for us, right? We still have clients who want to have their hard copy of the claims file. So that was one of the more challenging ones. But what's also been quite interesting is that some of our underwriters have seen an increase in business. They've had an increase in people coming to them. So although during that first phase, we thought, we're obviously exposed, there's a lot of financial risk that we carry as an insurer, we were seeing other markets outside of the Lloyd's market, for example, such as the Asian market and the US market, who couldn't place risks because of the processes they had. Whereas uniquely, the Lloyd's market had actually been doing a lot of work on electronic placement and was actually in a really good position and able to take some of that additional risk from other markets. And we were able to write it in London, which was kind of, I thought, quite amazing considering the reputation that Lloyd's has.
Could you unpack that a little bit? So
yeah.
Why were people, and what is this reputation which Lloyd's have? So what is the...
Sure. So the Lloyd's market is, something like 500, 600 years old, and that's probably misquote. Don't quote me on that. I think it was the early 1600s, maybe even earlier, where Lloyd's was a coffee shop where people would meet, and they would talk about if they had a ship sailing from one part of the world to the other, They would pool that risk amongst the people in the coffee shop. And ultimately, if the ship sank, then things would get paid out. That's a very basic version of it. But for nearly 500 years, Lloyd's was all paper-based. There are some brilliant photographs or paintings even of, to be fair, of the underwriting room in Lloyd's, which is just mountains, piles, reams of books and folders. Everything was done on paper. In fact, even today, the underwriters still talk about the stamp, which is the kind of ink stamp that they would put onto risks and sign that they would accept some of that risk. So maybe a decade ago, the Lloyd's market started to try and become a bit more digital, a bit more electric, a bit more modern. And we started to move away from the paper and move on to more electronic placement and electronic platforms. Yeah. And I think it was 2 years ago, Lloyd's had a big drive for it's called PPL, it's an electronic placing platform. And because of that, what brokers would put the risks from their clients onto the electronic placement platform, and then the underwriters could accept their elements of the risk on there, which, market modernization, probably about 25, 30 years late compared to banking, but it just about arrived in time for this particular crisis.
Right, and that reputation is known to the market,
yeah.
and therefore people would trust you guys, trust the Lloyd's market in the way in which other markets, which are still less electronic, might have struggled.
Yeah, and so the anecdotal kind of feedback that I had from some of the underwriters was that some of the brokers were coming to them because they knew that they could place the risk there, whereas in the American market or the Asian market, because some of the processes were slightly more typically Lloyd's like, and they couldn't facilitate them. So yeah, just the digital nature, or the kind of the digital movement that Lloyd's are in at the moment has actually facilitated a lot more business coming to the Lloyd's platform than perhaps it would have done ordinarily.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting.
It actually is.
I've heard throughout the industry, the financial services industry, that actually the front office has found it quite easy to transfer, and the back office too, because they're kind of used to working. But it's the middle office which has really been most challenged, because actually because those team members are the most office-based, as you say, printing, delivering actual contracts and stuff like that. And also, it's not a culture they're used to. Everyone's used to having their middle office in their business all of the time and available to them. And actually, the real pinch point for many FS businesses has actually been that middle office. Is that your experience, Jonathan?
It's a really interesting perspective, actually. And I suppose the interesting thing about the insurance middle office is actually that's kind of a learning ground for a lot of junior staff. You learn about how insurance works by being in the middle office. You sit there with this is a very Lloyd's example, so it's not necessarily applicable to Europe, but for the Lloyd's example, as a middle office colleague, you get the slip, which outlines the risk, and it outlines how much of a percentage of that risk MS Amlin are taking. And you enter that stuff onto the system. So you've got, like I say, the front office are out there doing with the brokers, with the clients, middle office are entering stuff onto the systems. But because that kind of data entry into the systems is kind of starting to move away and is being replaced by the electronic placing, that middle office, they don't have as much interaction, and they're definitely not therefore learning as much as they may have done in the past. So whereas the front office are kind of fine and they're continuing to work, and in the back office we are fine as well, and we're kind of thriving. I think the middle office, where a lot of that learning takes place, that is somewhere where we are having discussions on how we facilitate that better.
Mm-hmm. It is really interesting, because I imagine that was also, although I imagine the continuity guys kind of knew this, it's kind of a surprise to most businesses that, because we're all so used to focusing on the front end and then accounting end as well, and the middle office being, a bit of a thing which is always there. We rely on it, and it just does its thing. And And actually, in this crisis, it's really been impacted in a way we never have expected. So
Yeah.
for our audience, there is a questions box at the bottom of the screen, so please post questions as we go through. What I want to do quickly is talk about the stages of this kind of a crisis. So we've talked a little bit about the chaos and reactive stage, which really, for many of us, was the first kind of the first few weeks and months of the crisis, and it was all consuming, highly reactive, incredibly hard to predict what to do. There was a lot of shipping of kit to people around the country. There was all this kind of stuff, getting people with the right internet and getting people to kind of recognize that this was the way it was going to be for a while. And then that is followed by a second stage, which really substantively we are all in now, which is kind of a combination of replanning and limited relaunch of our traditional environments. So we're seeing retail opening up, etc., and for businesses such as MS Amlin, our own, etc., we're looking at what is the plan for the new future, how is this going to work, and then finally we're going to move into kind of new reality stage. So I'm really interested in this, in the kind of replanning and what's been going on there, because that's really hitting us all at the moment, getting people back to the office, or maybe not getting people back to the office. So what's going on, Jonathan, in your business in this area? So how's the replanning coming? What's it going to look like in the next month or so?
So I can speak probably best about the HR team and the people function, and yeah. I think it's as an organization, we're on a treadmill at the moment, and we're also trying to change our socks. I think that's the way I describe it, insofar as we're going through an organization model transformation as well. So that began, I think it was November, December last year, and the kind of phase 2 is happening through this year. So we're also, whilst going through this coronavirus crisis, we're also trying to completely transform our operating model as well, which has meant that we've had to replan a lot of stuff. My job is to understand what the people functions change agenda looks like. What are all of the programs? What are all of the pieces of work that we're being asked to do by the business or the executive have sponsored us to do? And we went through that whole list and just went, right, what is on our must-do list? What if the regulator came in tomorrow and said, have you not done that? We would be in trouble. So what was must-do? Then there was a whole load of stuff which is kind of in the should-do category, which are the things that we really want to do. There's a burning platform to do them. It might be culture, it might be ways of working, but we should really do this. But if we didn't, the regulator wouldn't come and slap us on the wrist. And then there's a whole load of stuff which is kind of in the could do category, which is just the things that would be nice to have. And what we've been doing over the past couple of weeks actually is looking at that whole plan of work and going, okay, if it's in the could do category, should we probably stop putting any resource on that? Because you need to focus on all the other stuff that's in the should do and in the must do. And more we're finding that there are things that we originally had in should do that are being shoved up into must do because they are crisis related responses. So there's a lot of stuff we have in should do around our culture and our culture change, which is now absolutely fundamental to the success of our transformation work. It's fundamental to our success of thriving through these new ways of working. So whereas before we might have said, we can take resource off of that and put it over here, now it's front and center. So I suppose what we're trying to do as an organization is just identify the things that we must do. And if there's things that we don't need to do it, we're trying to be more pragmatic about it. And that goes, I'm talking about the HR function, but that goes for the conversations that we're having with COOs at the moment as well. We are focusing on the regulatory things, the things that the PRA and the FCA want us to do. We're focusing on the things that our clients need. And if it's nice to have, we're just parking it now. That's kind of our new normal. Sorry.
So I'm interested in a couple of dimensions on that. One is these priorities are changing, presumably. So how frequently are you running those sessions to identify with the HR team which fits which category? And yes, and then I'll ask my second question in a minute.
Okay, so I look at it quarterly at the moment. So we have like a monthly change agenda meeting. We have weekly meetings, but on a monthly basis, we focus on our change agenda. And on a kind of quarterly basis, we kind of look and replan. So we're looking at our half year. So we're saying this is where we've got to, and we're looking at the second half now and trying to create space for a lot of the transformation work. And we're actually going to sit down next week and review that. So I look at it on every quarter, but at the moment it's kind of more fluid than that. More like every couple of weeks.
At Varan, we do transformational HR work all the time. That's what our customers rely on us to support them to do. And we're hearing a lot of people saying, oh, I'm going to delay that transformational work. That transformational work's really hit the kind of could do box. But
yeah,
you're not reflecting that, Jonathan. You're saying that there's something's accelerating this. So why is this, and why is it still important? I mean, who cares about transformation when you're rescuing a business, basically, would be my question.
I completely get that. And I think that without airing all the dirty laundry in public, I think our MS Amlin's transformation is fundamental to the success of our business. And if we can't stand still. I think the insurance market before coronavirus was going through what was called like a hard market. So there's a lot of capital flooding into insurance from other sectors, which means that prices were being squeezed. So we were quoting lower and lower and lower to a point where we were probably quoting at a loss to retain business.
Yeah.
So as an organization, we recognize that our expense base is too high. We're not digitally focused enough. Our cost to market was too high. As the market consolidated and more mergers happened, that pace of change accelerated. So we weren't in a position that we could stand still. So if anything, this crisis has accelerated that, because we are in a year where we know we're not going to make a profit. We are going to lose millions, tens, if not hundreds of millions this year. Right. So we have to transform. It's accelerated it.
That is really interesting. I mean, we had the announcement yesterday of, now I'm trying to think which one of the big oil and gas firms, but writing down their gas fields and oil fields across the world. So they're taking the opportunity to actually really clean out and change their business. When I was speaking to Kevin Hogarth, who's one of the leaders in one of the global law firms, Norton Rose, Fulbright, sorry, he was saying that what he's expecting to happen is that businesses at the end of this, and what he's seeing already is businesses which are fit and ready at the end of this crisis are going to do really well, and other ones are going to fail very quickly. So actually, oddly enough, I think that we're seeing this kind of the transformational need is actually coming into larger focus. Those businesses who feel that their model is not what it needs to be in the future are having to turn themselves into fitter animals right now, because they can see already that the post-COVID world is going to be less forgiving, shall we say.
Definitely. And you know, we talk in the insurance market about a market moving event, which sees a lot of the capacity, the financial, the pounds in the market redistributed. Like this could be the market moving event that no one foresaw. Like we were talking in the past that the market moving events of the past are kind of gone because so much capital has flooded to insurance. We would need something like a global pandemic or a huge Californian earthquake to happen. Then yes. You know, the chances of that, the Californian earthquake's like 1 in a 300-year event. A global pandemic, I mean, they're the thing of the past, right? And yet here we are. So this could be the market moving event that the insurance market has been weirdly looking for, I suppose, over the past 20, 30 years. If you're fit and proper and ready to go when this is over, then yeah, I think you could be in a good position to thrive.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And then the other side of that is, I think you mentioned earlier that a lot of people in our businesses have been surprised by their ability to work in a very different way and bring change. Sometimes surprise is not quite the word.
So you broke up a little bit there, Tom, but so I suppose I could talk to you a little bit about how we've changed the mindset of some of our more traditional managers through this
Yes,
process.
please.
Yeah. So
Yes.
I think I mentioned earlier, we'd be doing a lot around what we've called work-life better, but there were definitely some naysayers who thought that fundamentally the right place to be successful in this office environment is in the office, and you can't be successful in the knowledge services working from home. And what has been brilliant is having forced a lot of those managers to work from home. I have seen firsthand the mindset change of those people, and how, I'll be honest, happier some of those people seem on video calls when they are being, they get to work from home, they get to see their children, they don't have to commute for 1.5 hours each way. So it's been really transformational, actually. And we've had some backlash from one of the things which has made me laugh a little bit is that a lot of our senior executives, in a very well-meaning way, have posted pictures onto our Yammer social platform, or have sent emails out of them working from their home office or working from their garden. And we've also got a lot of our colleagues who live in flats or don't have outdoor space, and so there's been a few kind of faux pas where those senior managers are going, "Isn't it great working from home? It's fantastic," but they've got 10 acres in their back garden. And
Yes.
So it has been sensitive that some of those people that were very against it have found that they absolutely love it, and some of those that perhaps really enjoyed the flexibility, being told they have to stay at home and they don't necessarily have that as much space in where they live, that's been a bit more challenging. So one of the things I would like to mention is that we've been doing a lot around mental well-being at MS Amlin over the past maybe year, and that has also been really, really helpful for us through this kind of middle phase. Because through the first phase it was exciting, this was new, it's novel. I got to work from home. Everyone's in crisis mode, everyone's getting really excitable. But through this kind of middle section, it has hit home to people that this is the new norm, and it is quite a challenge. So it has been quite helpful that we've had a lot of resources to support our teams and our colleagues around mental health, well-being, are you okay? Things like team coffees, team chats have been really helpful. Just those water cooler conversations that you don't have with people, we're now trying to encourage people to have those, but virtually, digitally. So the first phase, very exciting. This middle phase has been quite a challenge. Even though people are working from home, it can get quite tough.
Yes, yeah. I think it's really one of the things I've been reflecting on, and from our conversation pre this webinar, Jonathan, was a lot of our businesses have invested enormous amounts of money on beautiful environments for our staff at all levels.
Yeah.
So our offices, etc., have been a showcase where we've leveled that playing field effectively. So people come to work and you give them the very best environment, best locations, etc., to work from, with really magnificent facilities. And that is not at no cost. That's a significant investment for our businesses. And now people are working increasingly outside of the office. That differential of people having the right equipment or the wrong equipment is not there. But I wonder how we are going to address this in the future, because actually, it doesn't matter how grand the office is, it does not support or help our team colleagues, etc., who aren't going to be coming into it that often. And I wonder whether I wonder how we're going to show that investment in our colleagues and teams moving forward. And I'm not really expecting an answer, but it is an interesting question, I think.
Yeah. So I suppose we again, the culture transformation work that we were doing through 2019 has set us up weirdly and fortuitously to be in a good place when it comes to this. So we're trying to move ourselves to be more of a learning environment and a continuously learning organization. And I think that although you might not necessarily have a cool fancy office in a flashy location, that is, the kind of a touchdown for employees, actually being in a culture where you have an opportunity to learn either on the job or at the side of your desk or through kind of culture or ways of working interventions, to me, those things are going to become even more valuable. And we started on a culture journey last year with regards to some kind of targeted culture interventions where we took certain groups of management or groups of employees, depending on often around like talent and talent identification. And we started to say, talk about our different ways of working, talk about what high performance culture means. And we've actually repurposed some of that through this first half of the year to talk about, we're calling it thriving through uncertainty. So I suppose the kind of point I'm trying to make is that I think what's going to be really valuable going forward is that ability to learn new things, learn new skills, be exposed to new things, new skills, and to be able to demonstrate that as you kind of go through your career, that you spent X many years at X company, and it wasn't, oh, aren't they the really nice ones with the cool building in Canary Wharf? It was, oh, they're really known for learning, developing their people. They have a great learning culture. I think for me, that's where organizations are going to have to differentiate themselves now. Whereas before it was, we've got fruit in the bowl. Now it's like, oh, look, we've got these great learning platforms and you can go and you get great access to Harvard Managed Mentor or LinkedIn Learning, or we've got a great culture program. So those things to me become even more valuable.
Yeah, I think it's, and that's a very different discipline because we are looking at globally revisiting that employee value proposition.
Yeah.
Because the kind of values which we were able to provide kind of physically, infrastructurally, and in those kind of ways, if we're, with that stuff going, actually replacing it with a structured way, the structure comes with a structure, right? The structure of the City of London is a structure. Being part of it is a community which is automatically shared, which shares knowledge, information, etc.
Yeah.
Trying to replace that value is fascinating, I think.
Yeah, I'm actually just embarked on one myself actually around those kind of massive online courses where you can have hundreds of thousands of people logging onto things like edX, for example, and you have those. You can join a course with hundreds of thousands of people from all across the world who want to learn about the same thing. Well, you've got social interaction. I think it's kind of trying to think of the right word to say, but you've got like the social platforms, I suppose, where you learn and you interact with other people. They're going to become more and more important, more and more prevalent. I think they've brought people closer together through this past 6 months.
Yes.
And I think those online learning tools and online learning providers are going to become more important, more prevalent, and the ability for a company like MS Amlin to enroll teams or groups of colleagues onto these courses, those kind of digital MBA type programs, that's where people will be learning these skills and meeting new people and growing their network, because they can't go out of their office and bump into someone on the street and have a coffee with them at the moment.
Yes. And then, but even those things, I think, for the short term are harder to do. I mean, my team, a substantial part of our team, we would send every year to that don't fall off your seat with excitement, the various technology fairs which would occur across Europe, so that we could assess and look at the latest HR technology and stuff like that. Now, it sounds like the worst thing ever, but actually it's fantastic for everybody because we get to go to a different city, we get to kind of hang out with customers and colleagues and partners, etc. There's parties and things, and it's really an energizing and value added and great benefit to everybody. And I can't, it's really interesting to see how to replace those kind of team building type activities, I think.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And then I look at my younger, I mean, I'd like to think I'm not that old, but I look at my younger nephews who live not too far away from me. They do all of their socializing online, all of it. They speak to their friends when they're playing whatever online gaming they're playing. They have their headsets on, they laugh and they joke around, but they're on their own and they're in their bedrooms. And when I talk to my my sister-in-law, she's like, I can't get them to leave the bedroom, but I don't really mind because they're on the phone to their friends, they're socializing, they're chatting. That's how they socialize. So I suppose, you know, maybe we're just being a bit old-fashioned, but I do think that online social interaction is going to be the new norm going forward. And maybe as organizations, we need to embrace that, and we need to get better at organizing large scale video conferences, smaller scale coffee meetings, those kind of opportunities to have shared learning experiences, but digitally.
Okay, and before we go on to the questions, which I'll ask Becky to read out in a second, I guess so in the short term, are you reopening your office? How's that working, Jonathan? When are you expecting yourself to be next in, or if at all? And are you expecting it to be a different environment for the next 6 months? And what are you expecting to see different?
Yeah, so we have reopened our office, but our standard line to all of our colleagues is, if you don't want to come into the office, you don't have to. If you don't need to come into the office, we're not making you. And we did an all staff survey, and 80% said they kind of like it the way it is, and they're much happier to work at home. So for us, we're seeing it as an opportunity, probably in the kind of more medium to long term, to just rationalize down our office space across our estate. Obviously, in countries like Bermuda, where like the office is the social space and there isn't necessarily that much working from home, I don't think it will change that much. But for London, especially, we are looking at severely rationalizing the number of floors we have in our building, because they're just not needed. On return to work, the building management said you can expect 90-minute delays with the lifts because we're only allowing 2 people in the lifts at a time. So again, that made people go, do you know what? It's not worth it. We have talked, or we are introducing kind of one-way systems. We're introducing reduced desk capacities. We've taken desks out. We're asking people to bring their own cutlery, for example. But ultimately, we're saying to our colleagues, you don't need to come back in if you don't want to. And I think that will be, I think we've had some of our suppliers and some of our kind of peers have also said we're not expecting our colleagues to come back into the office this year. And I honestly don't think that I will need to go into the office this year. I might choose to, if possible, run some more of our planning meetings, some of our team meetings. It might be nice to see each other, because it is nice to see each other. But I think those interactions will be about relationship building and just less about detailed planning and programming, because I think relationships are really difficult to build digitally, and I think they're harder to maintain. But I think when we do meet together in person, we need to make the most of that time, and it needs to be either really creative or really relationship focused, because the actual tasks we can tend to do them from home better, if anything, with less distraction. So for me, I see maybe once or twice a month max, if that, maybe once a month going forward in the office, and the rest of the time I can see myself and my team being at home.
So colleagues getting together, but getting together not to work on the actual material, but instead to reassert their relationships and build a stronger team. So a team focus rather than a work focus to bringing people together. I think that's a really interesting lesson.
Yeah, and I think that there's a difference between a team and a working group, right? And working groups are very task focused, almost authoritarian. You've got someone at the top who's telling people what to do. And a team is where you have people working together with strengths and weaknesses. That the sum of the parts is more than just the people on their own, right? And my worry is that the more time we spend apart from each other, the more we drift towards just being a working group and away from being a really high performing team. And I think that spending time together should be focused on how we can be better as a team rather than working on working group focused tasks.
That's a really interesting lesson. I'm going to actually think about that, because it's oddly enough, as a consultancy and transformational consultancy, we're used to our colleagues working in different client locations and all that stuff. And so when we do get together, it's firstly quite a rare thing, and secondly is a team focused thing. But we haven't kind of worked out how to do that this year in a kind of socially distanced, appropriate way. But I'm going to take your lead on this, and I'm going to think about that straight after this call. So that was one thing I've taken away, is that. But there were many others. That was really interesting. Becky, what questions have we got on Q&As? And I've got hundreds more questions, but let's open it to the audience. So.
Yeah, so we've got a question from Nigel, who asked a really good question last week around presenteeism and how we avoid almost favouring people who do choose to come into the office and who are visible. So that's kind of something to bear in mind. This question, I think, is kind of related, which is around how we support new joiners to build relationships if they're working from home. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, or how you've been doing virtual onboarding, Jonathan.
I think that's really interesting, Jonathan, because I do think there's an opportunity for bright people to look at the chairman's and board's agenda and then make sure that that's their day. When they're in, if you see what I mean, to get that. We've seen it in the past, but presenteeism, very interesting.
So I think the presenteeism point is it's a funny one, because I think you almost see it now anyway with regards to, we have an instant messenger called Jabber. It's part of the Cisco platform, I think. So we have instant messenger, and I think it's interesting how many people prefer to log on early and send emails early, and they're on instant messenger, but also they're still on there late. And I suppose there is kind of an element of that presenteeism, but like a digital presenteeism as opposed to just being in the office. And one of the things that I'm really focused on in the team's ways of working conversation is how you can stop cutting people out. And that's probably not great language, but I think it kind of does what it says on the tin, in that if you have 2 or 3 people who do go into the office and have a conversation and things do move quickly, you have to be so consciously aware of the number of people that need to be in the loop, who you would usually just see next to you and go, we've just to let you know, you now have to consciously think about how you can update people regularly on the things that move. Now, we have monthly video conferences in our team, and we had to move the date a couple of times, and I have to consciously think about who do I need to tell, because they're meant to be presenting, whereas in the past I just bump into them. So on the presenteeism point, I think there's an onus on those that are in, or onus on those that are having conversations on maybe a one-to-one basis on WhatsApp or Zoom or whatever it is, to make sure they loop in other people and make sure other people are kept aware of things that are ongoing. I don't think there's an easy answer to it, but I think it's something that I'm trying to work on myself too.
On the other side, which is the new joiners side,
yes.
So I think it's a specific point around new joiners that they bringing them into, are there going to be any new joiners, but new joiners, bringing them into the team, because they're the ones who get left out. But then I think also there's another question about this, but in the insurance industry, an awful lot of going from a junior to a operating, front office person is actually about learning from colleagues, watching.
Definitely.
And how do you replicate that? Because you sit at the desk, you listen to what the guy says. If you're getting the conversations wrong, then you tell them to go and shadow that person. So how is that stuff going to be replicated for the new starters, for skill acquisition, people skills, I guess?
Yeah, so new joiners. I've had a couple of new kind of contractors who've joined in my team, and I think we've also had other people in kind of peers who've joined who are new. And what we found works really well is having quite an organised kind of onboarding schedule. So literally having video calls with as many people in the team as possible, as quickly as possible. And that, I think, we had one new team member who joined to head up our talent acquisition function. I think the first week she was literally back to back on video calls, just talking to people and meeting people and starting to build a relationship. And what was great was that she was always had video camera on, really engaging, lots of questions. And I think I've never met this person in person, but I do feel like I've already started to build a relationship with them. So to me, as a new joiner, if I'm a manager of a new joiner, I would be trying to encourage them to call and book in time with as many people as possible, have those video conversations, start to have those kind of coffee conversations and just get to know people. But as a new joiner, I'd be doing the same. I'd be reaching out. I mean, we've had some of our senior leaders have been saying, hey, if you want to have a virtual coffee with me, then, get in touch with my PA or EA and we'll sort something out. So I think there's an onus on new joiners and the managers of new joiners to proactively encourage people to have these type of one-to-one conversations as often as possible to start building a relationship, because they won't just happen perhaps organically as they used to. They have to be proactively done.
I was reading from a business leader on, I think it was on my TikTok, actually, weirdly. But anyway, and it was a very short thing, but he was saying that actually one of the key skills to be developing at this stage or any stage is kind of the ability to use these kind of tools, the ability to public speak, the ability to do this, because it's a completely different skill from a face-to-face skill. We're all used to developing that as we move through our careers, but actually doing this well, knowing what's appropriate, knowing how to do this, practicing it, rehearsing, and really getting some skills together on how to present oneself online, etc., actually is one of the new business skills, which are kind of, the next 20 years is going to need this. Yeah, definitely. I mean, you look back, I've read a really great book. It's by Linda Grattan, and it's about like the future of work. And I think it's up here somewhere. And 20 years ago, the concept of, trying to think of a good example, an artificial intelligence programmer wasn't a thing. But as time evolves, new jobs emerge, new technologies emerge, and older jobs that were perhaps more traditional at the time, they disappear, and new jobs emerge that you could never even have imagined. And as that happens, new skills need to be developed, new skills need to be learned. And I think, yeah, you're right. Like, this is another great example of a bit of a revolution. It's not particularly slow. It's not kind of a 2 or 3 year evolution. It's an overnight revolution that those that are quick to adapt and are quick to learn new skills can thrive in. But I also think it's important to recognize that not everybody needs to be able to present. Not everyone needs to be really comfortable on video camera, because actually, to the earlier point about presenteeism, being able to deliver on tasks and deliver on those tasks really, really well also becomes a bit of a commodity. And being able to kind of fire and forget a task to a really, really trusted lieutenant or whatever it is, and for it to come back perfectly, that's an amazing skill to have. So I think, yeah, that there are new skills that need to be learned. And I think those that if you can learn to be better doing this type of thing, then you'll be all right. But I also think we shouldn't forget that the world isn't just extroverts. There are some more introverted people who have different skill sets that are possibly even more valuable at a time like this. Whereas I need people around me to get energy, but there are others in my team who are thriving at the moment and are producing some amazing work because they don't have to put the camera on, they don't have to be present all the time, and they can concentrate on a task. So it's kind of a bit of both, right? It's swings and roundabouts, bit from the left hand, bit from the right. Yeah, and in the end, it's the technical quality of our work which really counts, and that. Well said. I think that's a really good point. But I'd like to thank you, Jonathan. That was a really great session. Oh, cool. And thank everyone else for attending. Remind everybody of today's bombshell, which is that there is the odd useful thing on TikTok.
Yeah.
I have to admit, that's the only useful thing I've ever seen on TikTok.
I had to delete TikTok, Tom. It was taking up too much of my time. I had to delete it.
Well, I'm impressed that you've been on it and off it. Yes, I love it. Great. So, look, thank you everybody for joining. I hope that was useful. This is going to be followed up with a series of webinars about the anatomy. As you know, this is the 12th of those series, and we'll be doing new ones from next week onwards, plus our automation and RPA ones, and our transformational how to reframe our programs and plans for the new reality. So thank you everybody for joining. That was really great. And Jonathan, thank you very much. That was fantastic.
Thank you, Tom.
So thank you very much.